My mother-in-law told me over the phone that a soldier's daughter didn't deserve a real wedding, and she said it 3 days before my daughter's surgery was scheduled. I was 39, a Coast Guard logistics chief stationed near Norfolk, sitting in a plastic chair outside the cardiac unit at Children's Hospital of the King's Daughters. My son Theo was 4, asleep under a paper-thin blanket with a monitor clipped to his tiny finger. A cardiologist named Dr. Amara Okonkwo had just told me the hole in his heart wasn't closing on its own anymore. It needed to be fixed now. The number the billing office needed by Friday was $6,200. Not an impossible sum, just enough to make you think someone who loved you would answer the phone. So I called my husband, Desmond Pruitt. He picked up on the 5th ring, already irritated. I told him Theo's surgery needed the deposit by Friday. There was a pause, but not the kind I needed. Then he said, "We just put the deposit down on the lake house. Every dollar's committed right now. You'll have to figure it out." Before I could respond, his mother Ione took the phone from him. She had a voice built for hymnals and humiliation in equal measure. She told me the Pruitts had already given enough to a marriage that hadn't given them a real wedding, a real ceremony, or a real daughter-in-law who understood what family meant. Then the line went dead. I sat in that hallway a long time. I didn't cry. I folded the billing estimate into a small square and put it in my pocket. That evening, Desmond's father, Walton Pruitt, walked down the hallway in a windbreaker, looking smaller than I remembered him. He didn't ask where Desmond was. He sat beside me, pressed an envelope into my hand, and told me not to open it until I was home. That was when I understood. It wasn't just money. It was a warning. I didn't open it that night. Theo finally slept, and I sat by the window, holding the envelope, afraid of what it would tell me. Around midnight I broke the seal. Inside was a cashier's check for $6,200, and a short note in Walton's shaking handwriting. "I should have told you sooner. He's been lying to you longer than you know." The next morning I paid the deposit. Theo's surgery could move forward. Walton was waiting outside with 2 coffees, and for the first time since Theo was born, someone besides me remembered how I took mine. Over that coffee, he told me things I'd spent years not letting myself see. That I'd mailed home deployment pay for a decade, while Desmond's landscaping business struggled to break even. That I'd turned down a shore assignment in San Diego so we could stay near his family. That Ione had spent every holiday reminding me a mother in uniform was a mother who'd already chosen wrong. Then Walton told me about the lake house. He'd reviewed the closing papers at Desmond's request 6 weeks earlier. My name wasn't on the deed, not as co-owner, not anywhere. When he'd asked why, Desmond told him plainly, military marriages don't always last. Ione had called it smart planning. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because the truth was too ugly to argue with right away. That same week, my bank sent a fraud alert. $11,000 had moved out of our joint savings in 2 transfers I never authorized. When I called, the representative told me the transfers required joint authorization, meaning Desmond had approved them himself. 22 years of marriage suddenly felt like paperwork someone had been shredding quietly, while I wasn't looking. Theo's surgery went well. Dr. Okonkwo used the word optimistic, and for a few days, I let myself hold on to ordinary things. Crayons on the kitchen table, his small sneakers by the door. But the night we came home, I found Desmond's home office door slightly open. Inside a drawer that wouldn't close, I found a manila envelope, closing documents for the lake house, a mortgage application listing my Coast Guard income to strengthen his approval, without my knowledge or signature, and a signature on the deed application that wasn't mine. The letters leaned wrong. Someone had copied my handwriting, not written it. This wasn't a marriage falling apart anymore. This was a plan, built with my name and without my consent. I photographed every page and called a family law attorney the next morning. Her name was Marguerite Voss, and she'd spent 30 years watching families come apart on paper before they came apart in person. She looked at the forged signature, then at me. "Did you sign this?" "No. Have you ever authorized him to sign for you?" "Never." She said this wasn't only a divorce issue anymore, and told me that facts were harder to argue with than feelings. She gave me a legal pad and told me to write down every deployment, every transfer, every unexplained purchase, going back years. I filled 12 pages in 3 nights. A pattern emerged I'd never let myself see. Money vanished after nearly every deployment, followed within weeks by a truck, a boat, now the lake house. I became 2 people that month. One drove Theo to follow-up appointments and signed permission slips like nothing was wrong. The other sat across from Marguerite, with bank records and photographs, building a file Desmond didn't know existed. Walton called 2 weeks later, his voice tight. Ione had discovered his withdrawal to help with Theo's surgery and told Desmond. Desmond drove to his parents' house and accused his own father of betraying him. Ione packed a suitcase to stay with her sister until Walton, in her words, came to his senses. Walton told me he helped carry the suitcase to the car. Then he told me the part that mattered. While cleaning the garage, he'd found a box Desmond asked him to store 2 years earlier. Inside was an email from Desmond to a financial advisor, dated nearly 3 years before Theo's surgery. Once she finishes 20 years of service, we'll have access to her retirement benefits. After that, the divorce should be straightforward. He hadn't just been planning a lake house, he'd been planning an exit, years in advance, using my career as collateral. The hearing was in Norfolk on a Thursday morning. Marguerite presented the bank records first, every transfer dated and traceable back to my deployments. Then the mortgage documents, with an enlarged copy of the forged signature and a certified forensic examiner's report confirming it wasn't mine. Desmond's attorney called it speculation, until Marguerite called her next witness, Walton Pruitt. Walton testified that his son had told him, plainly, that military marriages don't always last, and that he'd watched his son plan around that assumption for years. The judge ordered a full accounting of marital assets and financial transfers, and strongly suggested all relevant documents be preserved starting that day. 3 days later, Desmond showed up pounding on my door, his accounts frozen, his business credit lines suspended. He didn't ask about Theo, he asked what was in Walton's envelope. I told him he still didn't understand. I know enough. When he reached for my arm, Walton's truck pulled into the driveway, and Walton told his son to take his hand off me. A sheriff's deputy, called by a neighbor, asked Desmond to leave. He didn't apologize. He just looked at me and said he never thought I'd fight back. I told him I wasn't fighting, I was protecting our son. The divorce was finalized that November. The financial investigation confirmed everything. My income used without consent to secure loans, transfers made during my deployments, a forged signature on federal mortgage paperwork. The court ordered repayment, and the lake house, the thing he'd valued over his son's surgery, was sold to satisfy the judgment. Walton filed for divorce from Ione 2 months later and started bringing soup by on Sundays. Theo is 7 now. His scar has faded to a thin line, and when he asks about it, I tell him it reminds us how brave he was. I went back to my unit that spring, believing something I hadn't let myself believe before, that carrying everything alone isn't strength, it's just a habit nobody ever asked me to break. Justice didn't come with shouting. It came through documents, patience, and a father-in-law who finally chose what was right over what was easy. If you were in my place, would you have confronted him the moment you found that drawer, or would you have waited, the way I did, until the whole file was built?